Vivid verses.
The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and the particular plastic and bleach scent of a blanket that's been washed too many times in industrial machines. And I woke up to it slowly, the way you surface from deep water, aware of light before sound, sound before pain, pain before thought. The pain came in fast once it arrived. My right leg was elevated and encased and didn't feel like a leg anymore, so much as a fact I was being informed of. My back ached in a way that suggested it was being closely monitored rather than simply hurting. The first coherent thought I had, before I'd even fully placed where I was Bridget, not in the abstract sense. Specifically, I need her to know I'm okay. I need her here. The thought arrived with its own physical weight, a kind of urgent gravity pulling everything else into orbit around it. I tried to sit up, and a nurse, young, dark-haired, name tag that said Rachel, put a hand on my shoulder, gently but with the practiced firmness of someone who does this 40 times a shift. Don't, she said. You got a fractured femur, and we're still waiting on imaging for your spine. You need to stay still. Where's my wife? My voice came out cracked, unfamiliar to me. Rachel's face did something small and quick, a recalibration I wouldn't have caught if I hadn't spent 15 years reading rooms for a living. Can I get you some water? Where's my wife? I said again, slower. She's not here right now. When did she leave? A pause. Not a long one. Long enough. She left around midnight. I came on shift at 11, and she was already making arrangements to go. Rachel's tone was carefully neutral, the tone of someone reciting facts she'd rather not be the one reciting. She mentioned she had a trip planned. Today. I think she said she didn't want to lose the deposit. I lay there and let that move through me the way you let a wave move through you when you decided not to fight it. You just let it pass over and through, and you know what it does on its way. What it did was simple. It arrived as a drop in my stomach, sharp and clean, almost clinical, and then it left, and what replaced it was a stillness I recognized from exactly one other context in my life. The half second after I've made a decision, and before I've told anyone, when the decision's already real, but only I know it yet. What time is it? I said. Just after 6. Saturday morning. And the accident was Thursday night. You've been in and out. You're a little behind on time, which is normal. So, Thursday night, a delivery truck had run a red light and turned my sedan into something the fire department needed cutting tools to open, and I had been unconscious or semi-conscious for the better part of the day, and somewhere in that day my wife had assessed the situation, weighed against a trip to the coast with 3 women she'd known since college, and concluded that the trip held. Is there anyone you'd like us to call? Rachel asked. Family? She left your phone in the drawer there, said she'd charged it before she left. No, I said, not right now. Thank you. She left. I lay in the bed and looked at the ceiling, which had one water stain in the shape of nothing in particular, and I did the thing I do, which is take an experience and turn it over slowly until I can see all its surfaces. She knew the trip was booked for today. She knew that this morning. She had, 6 hours between the call from the hospital and the time she needed to leave for the airport. She made a calculation in that window. The calculation was, my husband is alive, stable, in competent hands, and the deposit on this trip is non-refundable, and the friends are waiting, and 4 days from now none of this will matter, because he'll still be here when I get back. That's not cruelty. I want to be precise about this, even now, even lying here with a rod about to go in my femur. That's not cruelty. Cruelty would almost be easier to sit with, because cruelty has heat in it, has intention. This was colder than that. This was arithmetic. She ran the numbers on what I was worth to her in that specific moment, against what 4 days at the coast with Hannah and the others was worth. And I lost. Not by a little, by enough that it wasn't even a hard decision for her. She didn't agonize. She packed. The thing about clarity, real clarity, the kind that comes maybe 4 or 5 times in a life, is that it doesn't feel like an epiphany. It doesn't arrive with music. It arrives like this, flat, quiet, and undeniable, the way a printout tells you a number. I had spent 6 years building a life with a woman I believed would, if the floor ever genuinely gave out beneath either of us, be standing there when I looked up. I now had information suggesting otherwise. The information was reliable. It had been gathered under conditions, my own incapacitation, that left no room for performance for either of us. People are exactly who they are when they don't know they're being watched, and Bridget hadn't known anyone was watching because the only witness had been unconscious. I asked Rachel when she came back from my phone. The first call I made was to Theo Marsh, who'd been my lawyer for 9 years and had handled nothing more dramatic for me than a commercial lease dispute and a will. I called him at 7:15 on a Saturday morning, which I never did, and he picked up on the second ring with the alertness of a man who knows an off-hours call from a client he trusts is not a social call. "Connor, you all right? I'm in the hospital. Car accident Thursday night. I'm stable. Femur's broken. They're still checking my spine, but I'm tracking fine mentally if that's what you're asking." "Jesus, do you need anything? Should I come down there?" "Not yet. I need to ask you something, and I need you to just answer it straight. No hedging. If I wanted to file for divorce, starting today, from this bed, is there anything that would stop me from doing that effectively?" There was a pause. Theo had known Bridget at our wedding, had been at 4 dinners since. He didn't ask why. That's one of the things I've always respected about him. "No," he said, "nothing stops you. You want to think about timing around assets, but nothing structural prevents it. You want me to start drafting?" "Yes." "Connor, I'm not going to ask what happened, but I want to say one thing, and then I'll do exactly what you tell me. You're on pain medication in a hospital bed 40 hours after a serious accident. If you want me to start drafting today, I will. But I'd be a bad lawyer and a worse friend if I didn't ask you to confirm this again Monday, with a clear head, before anything gets filed." "That's fair," I said. "Draft it today. File nothing until I confirm Monday. But draft it today." "Understood. What happened, if you want to tell me?" I told him. Not with heat. I noticed myself narrating it the way I'd narrate a transaction that had fallen through. The facts in order, no editorializing. He was quiet for a second after I finished. He started, and then didn't finish the sentence, which told me more than whatever he'd been about to say would have. "Draft it," I said. "I'll call you Monday." The second call was to the bank. I have, separate from our joint accounts, a personal account I'd kept open since before the marriage, mostly out of habit, never really used. I asked them to confirm the balance and to flag the account for a security review, given that I'd been hospitalized and wanted to make sure nothing unusual happened with access while I wasn't able to monitor it closely. This was, I'll admit, partly precaution and partly a small, private test of my own resolve. If I was willing to start protecting what was mine while still in hospital gown, the decision wasn't reactive. It was load-bearing. It would hold weight. The third call was to our property manager, a brisk woman named Odalise who managed the building we lived in. I asked, in a voice that I kept level and unremarkable, whether there'd been any issues with the unit, whether the rent was current, whether there was anything that needed my attention. There wasn't. I thanked her and said I'd be reachable by phone for the next while, as I was recovering from an accident, and to route anything urgent to me directly rather than to my wife. She said, of course, hoped I felt better soon, and didn't ask why I'd specified that. People rarely do when you say things in a tone that doesn't invite questions. By 9 in the morning, I had made 6 calls. By 11, I'd slept for 2 hours, woken to a doctor confirming no spinal injury beyond soft tissue damage and bad bruising. A relief that registered as relief, and nothing more, no flood of gratitude, No sense that the universe had spared me for a reason, and made 3 more calls. None of them were to Bridget. None of them were to anyone asking where she was, when she'd be back, whether she knew I was awake. My mother called at noon. She'd heard from Bridget's mother, who'd heard from Bridget, who'd apparently called her own mother from the airport, which told me something too, that informing her own family had ranked above informing mine, above being in the room. "Connor, honey, are you all right?" Linda just called me. I had no idea. "I'm okay, Mom. Femur's broken. I'll be in here a few more days, but no spinal damage. I'm going to be fine. Thank God. Is Bridget with you?" Linda said something about a trip. "Bridget's not here," I said. "She left for a trip with her friends before I woke up." There was a silence on the line that had a shape to it, the particular silence of someone doing arithmetic they don't want to be doing. "She left," my mother said slowly, "while you were—" She'd already booked it. Apparently, it didn't seem worth changing. "Connor." My mother's voice had gone very quiet, the way it used to when I was a kid and had done something that scared her more than angered her. "What are you going to do?" "I've already started," I said. "I called Theo this morning." I expected her to say something, to tell me to wait, to think it through, to not make decisions from a hospital bed. She'd raised me, after all, on a fair amount of sleep on it, and don't say anything you'll regret. Instead, after a moment, she said, "Good." Just that. One word, but it landed with the weight of 40 years of her knowing me well enough to know I wasn't asking for permission and wasn't going to be talked out of it, and that the question wasn't whether I decided, but whether she'd support the decision. She did. I noted it, filed it, and felt something in my chest loosen by maybe 10%. Bridget didn't know any of this yet. As far as I could tell from the silence on her end, she didn't know I was conscious, possibly didn't know the extent of the accident at all beyond whatever clinical summary she'd gotten from the hospital before she left. Stable, expected to recover, no immediate danger, which was, I imagine, exactly the information she'd needed to make her calculation feel defensible. He's stable. He's not in danger. The deposit is non-refundable. I could practically hear the internal logic of it, because I knew her, because 6 years teaches you the shape of someone's reasoning even when you disagree with the conclusion. She texted me Friday evening. I found this when I finally looked at my phone Saturday afternoon, scrolling back through what I'd missed while unconscious. "Just landed. Hope you're resting. Call when you can. Miss you already, LOL." Sent at 6:42 p.m. Friday. Roughly 18 hours after the accident, roughly 6 hours after she would have known I was in surgery for the femur. I didn't respond to that one. I didn't respond to the one Saturday morning either. Morning. "Beach is gorgeous. Wish you could see it. How are you feeling?" Sent, I noted, with a photograph attached. Sand, water, her foot in the foreground with a new anklet I didn't recognize. I want to be precise about what I felt looking at that photo, because I think it matters, and because I've turned it over enough times since to be confident in the description. It wasn't rage. I didn't want to throw the phone. What I felt was something closer to the sensation of watching a building you used to live in being demolished from a safe distance. A clean, almost administrative sorrow, the recognition that something is ending, paired with the simultaneous recognition that the ending is correct, is even slightly overdue, and that grief and rightness can sit in the same room together without contradicting each other. I didn't respond to either text. By the time she called on Saturday afternoon, I'd had 8 hours of consciousness to think, 3 calls with my lawyer's office, 1 with the bank, and a clear MRI result, and what I picked up the phone with was not anger. It was something quieter than anger and considerably harder to argue with. "Connor, oh my God, finally. I've been so worried. Why haven't you texted back?" "I've been in and out of consciousness, and then dealing with some logistics," I said. "I'm okay. No spinal injury. Femur's broken. Surgery went fine. I'll be here a few more days." "Oh, thank God. I wanted to call you the second I heard, but the signal here is awful, and I figured you were resting anyway. You knew Thursday night, I said. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact I was placing on the table between us. The way you'd set down a document you wanted someone to read before continuing the conversation. A pause. Ah, yes. The hospital called me Thursday night, but they said you were stable, that it looked like you'd be okay. And Connor, I'd already paid for the whole trip. Hannah and Priya and Maya were counting on me. And the doctor on the phone said you were sedated and wouldn't even really be aware of anything until... I understand the reasoning, I said. I'm not asking you to re-justify it. I'm just confirming the timeline. You knew I was in the hospital with a broken leg and possible spinal damage, and you got on a plane 12 hours later. It wasn't, when you say it like that. It sounds, Connor, I was a wreck. You have to believe me, I cried the whole flight. I believe that, I said, and I did. I think she had cried. I think she'd felt genuinely bad. None of that changed what she'd done. And I'd reached the point in my life, sometime in the last 18 hours, where I understood that how someone feels about a choice is a separate fact from what the choice tells you. People can feel terrible about doing the thing that reveals exactly who they are. The feeling doesn't undo the revelation. I'll be home Tuesday, she said. I'm coming straight from the airport. I'll be at the hospital. I should be discharged by then, actually. I'll be home. Okay, good. Connor, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything right now, but I should have stayed. I know, I said. I didn't say anything else, and after a moment of silence that she clearly expected me to fill with reassurance, with it's okay, with the social grease that usually moves a conversation like this toward repair, I let it sit instead. I'm aware that not filling a silence someone expects you to fill is its own kind of statement. I made it deliberately. I love you, she said eventually. I'll see you Tuesday. Okay, I said, and we hung up. The papers were ready by Monday morning. Theo had drafted them over the weekend with the kind of speed that told me he'd taken my instruction seriously even while hedging professionally about timing. I called him Monday at 9, clear-headed, off the stronger pain medication and onto something milder, and he asked me the question he'd promised to ask. Same answer as Saturday. Same answer. You're sure? I'm asking because I have to, not because I doubt you. I'm sure. I want them ready for when she gets home Tuesday. I don't want this stretched out. I don't want a 6-month process where we both pretend we're deciding something we've already decided. You're filing before she's even home. I'm not filing yet. I'm having the papers ready on the counter, so the conversation we have Tuesday is the real one, not a delaying tactic dressed up as a discussion. He was quiet for a second. All right, I'll have them to you by tomorrow morning. The property manager called Monday afternoon to confirm she'd noted the access change. The bank confirmed the security flag was in place and that nothing unusual had moved through the personal account. I spent Monday afternoon doing physical therapy exercises in a hospital bed that felt mostly like being asked to wiggle a foot that belonged to someone else, and I spent the evening on the phone with my mother again, who asked gently whether I was sure. You don't have to be sure right this second, she said. You could wait until you're home, until you're feeling more like yourself. I'm myself, I said. This is what myself looks like when I have all the information I need. I know, she said. I just want to make sure you're not making a permanent decision out of pain medication and adrenaline. It's neither of those things, Mom. It's math. She left. I know what that means now in a way I didn't know it before Thursday. I'm not going to unknow it because 4 days have passed and she's apologized. There was a pause, and then my mother said something I've thought about often since. You sound like your father did the year he decided to leave the firm. Not angry, just done deciding and ready to act on it. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, she said, which for my mother is usually the same thing. I was discharged Tuesday morning on crutches with a leg that would be in a brace for another 6 weeks and instructions for physical therapy that I intended to follow precisely the same way I intended to follow through on everything else I decided in that bed. My friend Patrick picked me up from the hospital. Theo had offered, but I wanted my lawyer's involvement to stay where it belonged, and Patrick had known me since college and asked fewer questions than anyone else I could have called. "You want to talk about it?" he asked, once we were in the car, my crutches awkward in the back seat. "Not really. I want you to drop me at the apartment, and then I want to be alone for a couple of hours before she gets back. She doesn't know yet. She knows I'm being discharged today. She doesn't know what's waiting for her." Patrick drove for a while without saying anything, which is one of the better things about him. Then, for what it's worth, and I know you didn't ask, I think you're allowed to do this. I'm not going to pretend I don't think it's harsh, because 4 days is a long time, and I get why she went, on paper. But you were in a hospital bed, not knowing if you'd walk right again, and she was on a beach. That's not a story you get to talk your way out of. That's just what happened. "I know," I said. "I'm not looking for permission. I already decided." "I know you did. I just wanted to say it out loud once, so you'd heard someone else say it, not just yourself." I appreciated that more than I let on. The apartment was exactly as we'd left it Thursday morning. My coffee mug still in the sink, a stack of mail on the counter. The dishwasher I'd forgotten to start humming faintly in the kitchen on a delay, cycle neither of us remembered setting. I sat at the kitchen table with my leg propped on a second chair and the manila envelope from Theo on the counter, unopened, waiting, and I made myself a cup of tea I mostly didn't drink, and I thought about what I wanted to say and concluded that I didn't want to say very much. Bridget got home around 4. I heard her key in the lock, heard the particular sound her suitcase wheels made on the hardwood, and then she was in the kitchen doorway, tanned in a way she hadn't been in months, a tote bag over one shoulder, and her face doing the complicated work of trying to be relieved and apologetic and affectionate all at once. "Hey," she said, softening immediately at the sight of the crutches leaning against the table, the brace visible below my shorts. "Oh, look at you. Come here, let me." She started toward me, and I didn't move, which stopped her 3 feet short, her arms half raised, the gesture suspended in the air between us. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong," I said. "I'm just not ready for that yet." Her eyes went to the counter, to the envelope sitting there with Theo's firm name printed in the corner, and I watched her read it the way you watch someone solve a math problem in real time. The slow dawning, the recalculation, the moment the answer arrives, and it isn't the one they were hoping for. "What is that?" she said. "It's what it looks like. Connor." She said my name carefully, the way you'd say it to someone standing near a ledge. Can we talk about this? Before you do anything?" "We can talk," I said. "I'm not going to pretend I'm undecided, though. I want to be honest with you about that before we start." She pulled out the chair across from me and sat. And for a moment, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her look, the tan and the new anklet, and the trip suddenly looking like costume rather than evidence of a good time. "I made a mistake," she said. "I know I made a mistake. I should have stayed. I think I knew that even while I was getting on the plane, and I told myself it would be fine, that you'd understand, that the trip was already paid for and you were stable, and I was wrong. I see that now. Please don't let one bad decision undo 6 years." "It's not one decision," I said. "That's the part one need you to understand, because I think it's the part you're missing. It's not that you went on a trip. People miss things. People make mistakes about timing. If you'd had a work commitment you couldn't get out of, if you'd had a flight you genuinely couldn't change, I'd be having a different conversation with you right now. Then what is it? It's that you had 6 hours between finding out and getting on that plane, and in those 6 hours, you didn't call me. You didn't ask the doctors more questions. You didn't consider, even for a moment, canceling. You ran the numbers and the trip won, and it wasn't close. That's not a mistake, Bridget. A mistake is something you do without thinking it through. You thought this through. You decided, with full information, that a long weekend with your friends mattered more than being in the building where I was having surgery. I'm not angry about the trip. I'm responding to the math. She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had an edge of something sharper. That's so cold. You're talking about this like it's a spreadsheet. I know it sounds that way, I said. I've thought about why, and I think it's because the alternative, being angry, yelling, making you feel as bad as I felt lying in that bed, wouldn't actually tell you anything you don't already know. You know what you did? You don't need me to perform devastation for you to understand the weight of it. I'd rather just tell you clearly what it means. And what does it mean? It means I know where I rank, I said. Not in the abstract, not in some hypothetical crisis we used to joke about, in the actual, specific, real version of it. You found out. Now I found out too. I don't think either of us can pretend we don't know that anymore. People don't end 6-year marriages over one bad weekend, she said, and there was something pleading creeping into her voice now, the first crack in the composure she'd walked in with. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy, I'll do whatever you need, just don't do this from a place of shock or trauma or whatever this is. Give it time. I've had 4 days, I said. I don't think more time is going to change the math. If anything, more time would just be me talking myself out of something I already know to be true, and I don't want to do that to myself. So that's it? You're not even going to try? I tried for 6 years, I said, and for the first time since she'd walked in, I felt something in my chest tighten. Not regret, exactly, but the recognition of genuine loss sitting alongside the certainty, the two of them occupying the same space without canceling each other out. I'm not interested in retroactively trying harder to convince you I deserve to be there for. Either you knew, in the moment, that I was worth staying for, or you didn't. You didn't. I don't think I can build a marriage on top of that knowledge by pretending I don't have it. She started crying then, quietly, her hands pressed against her face, and I sat across from her with my leg propped on the chair and let her because I didn't think comforting her in that moment would be honest, and because some part of me, the part that had spent 6 years loving her without reservation, still didn't want to add cruelty to a situation that already had enough grief in it without it. I love you, she said from behind her hands. I do. This trip doesn't change that. I believe you love me, I said. I think that's almost the saddest part. I don't think you don't love me. I think you love me and still left, and I have to live with the fact that those two things weren't in conflict for you. That's the information I can't unknow. She tried again the following week, after I'd moved into Patrick's guest room. I hadn't wanted to stay in the apartment with her while the paperwork moved through, and she hadn't fought me on that. Not at first. She called on a Wednesday evening. I talked to my mom, she said, and to Hannah. They both think you're overreacting. They think you're punishing me for one trip. I'm not interested in what Hannah thinks, I said evenly. I'm not punishing you. I haven't raised my voice once in this whole process. I haven't tried to take anything from you that isn't mine. I filed exactly what the prenup specifies, nothing more. That's not punishment. That's just the conclusion. Hannah thinks you're being cruel. Hannah was in the hospital bed, I said. I understand she has opinions. I don't think they're relevant to what happened between us. A few days later, her mother called me directly, something Bridget had clearly arranged, or at least allowed, and I picked up because I didn't see a reason not to. Connor, honey, I just think you owe it to 6 years to really think this through, Linda said, her voice warm and concerned in the way of someone who'd known me since I was 26 and meant every word of her concern. People panic. Bridget panicked. She didn't think it through. I understand that's how it feels to her, I said. I don't think panic is quite the right word for a decision made over 6 hours with full information, but I appreciate you calling, Linda. I know this isn't easy for you either. Is there really nothing that would change your mind? I don't think so, I said. I've thought about it carefully, and I keep arriving at the same place. I'm sorry. She didn't call again after that. The last real conversation happened a month later, after the paperwork had largely moved through and we were down to dividing furniture and finalizing a date. Bridget asked to meet at the coffee shop near the old apartment, neutral ground, and I went on the crutches. The brace finally graduated to a smaller one, and she was already there when I arrived, 2 coffees on the table. Mine made the way I liked it, which struck me as both thoughtful and, somehow, the saddest gesture she'd made in the entire process. "I'm not trying to relitigate anything," she said, before I'd even sat down. "I just wanted to ask you something, and then I'll sign whatever you need me to sign." "Okay. Do you forgive me?" I thought about it honestly because the question deserved that. "I think so. I'm not angry at you, if that's what you mean. I don't think you're a bad person. I think you made a choice in a moment that revealed something true, and the truth was hard to live with, but I don't think the truth makes you a villain. I think it just makes us people who shouldn't be married to each other." "That's not really an answer. It's the honest one," I said. "I forgive you in the sense that I'm not carrying anger toward you. I'm not interested in punishing you or making you suffer for this. But forgiveness doesn't mean rewind. It doesn't put us back in the apartment with the dishwasher running and pretending Thursday night didn't happen. I know something now I can't put back in a box. That's not a punishment I'm choosing to give you. It's just a fact I have to live inside of, the same as you do." She turned her coffee cup slowly on the table, not drinking it, and for a while neither of us said anything, and the silence wasn't hostile. Just 2 people sitting in the wreckage of something that had genuinely been good for most of 6 years, taking a moment to notice that before closing the door on it. "I keep thinking," she said finally, "that if I just stayed that one night, none of this would be happening." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe it would have surfaced some other way, eventually. I don't know. I try not to spend too much time on a version of this where you made a different choice, because that's not the version that happened. I can only respond to the one that did. Is there anything I could have done after? Some way of making it right?" "No," I said gently, because I'd thought about this too in the quiet of Patrick's guest room, turning the question over the way I turn everything over. "I don't think there's an apology that undoes information. You'd have to have not left in the first place. Once you did, the rest of it was just me catching up to something that had already happened." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer and had only needed to hear it once, out loud, from me, to fully believe it. "Okay," she said. "I'll sign tomorrow. Thank you." We finished our coffee without saying much else, and when we stood to leave, she hugged me, briefly, and I let her, and there was nothing strange or charged in it. Just 2 people who'd loved each other saying goodbye to the part of themselves that had. It was late October by the time the apartment was officially mine and the last of her boxes had gone, labeled in her handwriting, "Kitchen, books, bathroom," stacked by the door for the movers on a Saturday morning that felt, for the first time in months, entirely ordinary. The brace was off my leg by then, replaced by a slight limp that the physical therapist promised would fade within a year, and the apartment, once the boxes were gone, felt larger than it had in a long time, in a way that wasn't entirely about square footage. I stood in the kitchen that evening, the dishwasher silent for once, and pulled out a pan and started dinner the way I had most evenings before any of this happened. Onions first, low heat, the patient work of building something that takes time and doesn't reward rushing. My phone buzzed once on the counter, a text from Patrick asking if I wanted to grab a drink Friday, and I answered it and set the phone face down and went back to the onions, which had started to turn the particular gold they turn right before you add the garlic. I locked the phone without checking anything else. The kitchen smelled like dinner, and outside the window the evening was doing the unremarkable thing evenings do in late October, going dark a little earlier than the day before, and I stood at the stove and stirred, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about anything at all except the food in front of me.
Thanks for listening.